Be nice to yourself and you'll make better art. I've been doing some reflecting recently on my artistic journey because I've been in a bit of a creative block. What I came to realize is that I make the best art when I'm nice to myself. This is some advice that I wanted to share with you because it sounds simple and obvious, but realizing it has helped me change my mindset a little bit. I thought back on all the times in my life when I felt creative and proud and happy with what I was making. There was a lot of experimentation in those moments. I was doing so much playing around and I just felt free. And I think in order to feel free, you have to be nice to yourself. And you have to have some confidence. I think for a lot of us, this time of creative freedom might have been childhood. Like, I always think back to this specific drawing I made of these fairies surrounding a little castle on top of a hill. I was just having so much fun when I made that drawing, and I remember being so proud of it. One of my friends is getting her master's in art therapy, and something that she learned and shared with me that I thought was really interesting is that age 12 is like a crucial age for whether or not you're going to continue making art. Age 12 is when you start to try and draw realistically, and so if you think that your drawings are pretty realistic, you will be more likely to continue making art than a kid that doesn't feel as good in their realism abilities. At the time, I was teaching art to elementary school kids, so I asked her, what kind of things can you do as an art teacher? It would help kids keep creating and not stop when they're 12 years old. Her biggest recommendation was to suggest using other mediums or try abstraction, because in abstraction, there's less perfection to worry about, and when you're trying a new medium, you don't really have control over it or know how it works, so it's all about just like playing around instead of trying to make something a certain way. But I think that this is really good advice for anyone at any age. Then I thought about all the other times in my life I've been happy with my art besides just childhood. And there are a lot of ebbs and flows in the process. It feels like I get really happy with my work and then it gets kind of stagnant, and it's just like a little wave. I was recently looking back on some of my old works from high school. There was this one particular painting, the color wheel painting, and I worked so hard on it, but I was drawing a person, and once it came time to do the face, I really messed it up. And I remember I was staying after school to work on it, and I left in tears because I felt like I messed the whole thing up, and it did look pretty ugly. But it was more about the feeling of having all those eyes on my work, or thinking I had eyes on my work, and feeling the pressure of that instead of like how I actually felt about it. But anyway, I moved on, and I was really lucky to have such a great art teacher who pushed us to experiment and use like wacky, unexpected colors, draw fun subject matter. In my senior year of high school, I did a self-portrait every day for a month in my sketchbook, and then I found a video on my computer of me flipping through those pages, and just the way that I talked about my art, I was so forgiving and kind to myself. And I feel like that's part of the reason that I was able to so freely experiment. Because sometimes now when I sit down to draw, I want to experiment. I just get like stuck in my head. But I think the first step in getting out of that funk is realizing that you need to be nicer to yourself in order to make bad art, which will let you make good art. But yeah, senior year in high school was a big wave year for me with how I thought about my own work, because that's when you apply to college, and I was applying only to art schools, making my art portfolio, feeling like I wasn't good enough and feeling the pressure of having to make certain pieces. But then that was all resolved once I got into art center. I felt like good and excited for the future and stuff. I went to art center. The first year is all about like fundamentals, so you're learning how to draw the body and the face, you're learning about values and design. But then I think it's like second semester that things start to get more fun and you start to be able to draw and stuff. That's when I start to really flourish again. It was kind of like a big incline my first few years of college. I was like feeling really good and excited to be there. Then COVID hit and I had online classes, and then things went down and just stayed. My last like 2 years of college, I feel like I was kind of just riding it out. I wasn't doing as much experimentation and stuff as I was in the beginning. I felt really bad about myself for that, which I think contributed to me not pushing myself. And that's why it's so important to have confidence. It was just like the worse I felt about myself and my art, the harder it was for me to make anything. And so then I would push off making stuff and procrastinate, and then I wouldn't give myself the opportunity to make anything that I was proud of. But here's the thing, even though I wasn't loving what I was making, I was in school for art, so I still had to be making stuff. And when I look back on that work now, it's obviously not my best or my favorite, but it's not as bad as I thought at the time. Like, some of it is kind of cool. I kind of can just feel that my heart wasn't in it. For instance, I made these zines. This is like the biggest example that I can think of because I was really struggling in this class. It was like my first class after Zoom school. At the time, I was really into typography, so I did a cool job on that. But then there's other things like this little swan painting, and I feel like this is an example of my heart not being in it at the moment. Same with this, like I was just doing stuff. But it still looks kind of cool. Like, I like all the textures and colors. I don't hate it. This little tree, I feel like that's very different than anything I'm making right now. I like this one. I drew a car inside of this book, and I even like this page. It's just like goofy. I can tell that I did it really fast, but I was still trying to be creative. I also have this other book, which the theme is the book of opposites. See, I was really into doing typography. And this one I made after this one. I can see an improvement. This is pretty cool. I like how this looks on the page. Like, I don't love it, but it's not as like awful as I was beating myself up for at the time, which is something to keep in mind when you feel like you're just making the worst art ever. It's probably not as bad as you think. So we'll fast forward, I graduated, and then I started working as an art teacher. And that was the first time in a while that I feel like I really got my creativity back. I loved seeing the kids' artwork. I loved the kids' energy. This was the sketchbook that I started when I started teaching. You can tell I was very influenced by the kids' projects because I did stuff like this. The kids were so into making patterns, which made me into patterns. See, I did more patterns. Oh my gosh, more patterns. And I was using markers, might have been Crayola markers for this. Same with this. I think one of the first and easiest steps that you can take is standing up for your past self and the artwork that you made a long time ago, because that's when it gets really easy to start speaking negatively about things that you made. It's one thing to be critical and learn from your mistakes, think about ways to improve, but it's another to just write off your art as something bad and throw it in the trash. Of course, you don't have to keep everything, but just don't make fun of yourself. The other thing is that when I was feeling the most experimental and making like my coolest work, I was using a lot of mixed media. And I think doing that is really helpful in letting go of your expectations, playing, which is so important in improving and building your confidence. I took this one class in Art Center called Media Experimentation, which was one of my favorites. Every day we were supposed to just like use things how they weren't intended, or, you know, mix things together, just push ourselves and experiment as much as possible. Like my friend said, for the 12-year-olds, focus on abstraction. Cover as many pieces of paper as you can in as many different ways as you can. You can cut it up and reconfigure those, collage them together, get your hands moving and get you making art without feeling like you have to make a drawing that looks like something. The more that you know how to work with different materials and the more practice that you gain making art, naturally the more confident you're gonna be. So don't hold yourself back by not making art. That's just gonna keep you like in your slump. I feel like it's nice to just hear people's art journey, to know that you're not alone. Everyone has ups and downs. I'm gonna start reading The Artist's Way and doing those activities, so hopefully that will help me. Let me know what your tips would be for having more confidence in your art. And thank you for hanging out with me. I'll see you next time. Bye!